Right now, the quest to emancipate Americans living in Canada from paying the IRS has hit a snag. I'm not going to pretend that I fully understand what the IRS is doing and how they're doing it, but I do understand this much. The Internal Revenue Service is making life miserable for expatriate Americans. And by the way, its definition of what constitutes an expatriate American is pretty broad. It could include somebody who happened to be born in a hospital in Florida or Arizona to two Canadian parents who just happened to be down there on vacation when it was time for the baby to come along. IRS regards that baby, who today is probably, in their 30s or 40s or 50s, as an American citizen, and therefore requiring to file tax returns every year with the IRS. It's a complete load of codswallop, of course, and the Harper government is in on it, having decided that our financial institutions would share more information about their American customers with the United States, with the IRS. Okay, so there are a lot of expatriate Americans, in this city, a lot of expatriate Americans across this country and around the world who don't feel they should have to do this, who don't feel that they owe the United States anything in terms of taxes or anything else, and are very upset about it, to the point now, because the one way out of filing tax returns and placating the IRS is to renounce your American citizenship. And supposedly, now this comes from the U.S. State Department, so honestly I don't know whether we can believe it or not because it's justifying what they're just about to do. Supposedly there has been a dramatic increase in the number of Americans renouncing their citizenship. So, in response to that, the United States State Department has just announced that it's raising its renunciation fee. The fee it charges a U.S. citizen to renounce their citizenship from $450, which is stiff enough, up to $2,350. They've quintupled the fee. The message clearly is, if you're an American expat, according to America's definition of what constitutes an American expat, Uncle Sam's going to pick your pocket one way or the other. John Richardson is co-chair of a group in Toronto called the Alliance for the Defense of Canadian Sovereignty. An awesome-sounding name for his group, and we've reached him in Toronto. Hey, John.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Well, a bit of a cold, so my voice gives, but otherwise pretty good.
Okay. Now, what's your role in this and your organization's role in all of this? I know you're fighting it. What exactly are you doing?
Okay, well, I listened to your introduction to the show, and you were talking about the complicity of the Harper government.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, the government of Canada has signed an agreement with the United States to basically enlist the Canadian financial institutions, think banks, in hunting down anybody who the U.S. considers to be a U.S. citizen. In order to do that, as part of the omnibus bill in May, which was really designed to implement budget measures, and this, of course, has nothing to do with the budget,
mm-hmm.
They amended a number of Canadian laws to basically, one, force all Canadian financial institutions to take specific steps to hunt for anybody with U.S. indicia, two, turn that information over to the Canada Revenue Agency, who will, three, forward it to the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS. Now, it's a bit of an oversimplification,
mm-hmm.
But all of those are the essential pillars. And the Association for the Defense of Canadian Sovereignty obviously takes the position that, first of all, this is, in fact, turning over a good part of Canadian sovereignty directly to the Internal Revenue Service, but is also challenging the enabling legislation, which was part of the omnibus bill,
mm-hmm.
as being in violation of various provisions of the Canadian Charter of Rights, including the equality rights and search and seizure and that sort of stuff. But I would point out that the basis of the challenge is greatly interesting to me to hear your introduction, because, you know, you referred to these people as American expatriates, but the reality is that the vast majority of these people, overwhelmingly, are in fact Canadian citizens. Mm-hmm. Who just happen to be deemed by the U.S. to be U.S. citizens. I mean, there are very few people affected by this who are just, you know, an American coming north for a few years.
That's the thing, right? I mean, an American can come north to Canada, get his Canadian citizenship. He or she is a Canadian in the eyes of the government of Canada, in the eyes of the Canadian people, but in the eyes of Uncle Sam, he or she is still an American. You're born an American, you die an American, whether or not you were born to Canadian parents and, you know, came home 2 weeks later when the vacation was over.
Well, that's right. I mean, there's a wide variety of people who fit the circumstances of U.S. persons. And, you know, you refer to the example of a person born in Florida who comes back to Canada 3 days later. I mean, essentially, what the United States is doing, as incredible as this sounds in the modern world, is claiming the rights to tax somebody for the rest of their life because they happen to have been born on U.S. soil.
Yeah,
I mean,
pretty rich coming from
incredible. It's unfair. People don't choose where they're born.
Yeah, pretty rich coming from the government of a country that was founded on a tax rebellion.
Well, not only was it a tax rebellion, but it was a citizenship rebellion. I mean, the War of 1812 was fought on the basis that the British were trying to reclaim Americans who thought they were American, and, you know what, they wanted to conscript them to put them on British ships during the war. You know, that's what the War of 1812 was about. I mean, it's absolutely hypocritical, absolutely immoral, absolutely inconsistent with America's historical and philosophical past.
Okay, so in honor of all that, you are suing the Canadian government.
Well, yeah, absolutely, because what has happened is the Canadian government, a.k.a. the government of Stephen Harper, this has been opposed by the opposition parties, particularly the NDP, has essentially enacted laws to allow the United States to come in and lay claim to a very high percentage of Canadian citizens on the basis that they are somehow owned by the United States because they were born there. Mm-hmm. So the reason for suing the Canadian government is because the conduct of the Canadian government, in our view, violates various provisions of the Charter of Rights, and the whole purpose of the Charter of Rights is to protect Canadian citizens from the Canadian government. The irony is that in this case, the Charter of Rights is actually being used to protect Canada from the U.S. government as well.
John, can you stay with me? I need to take a break, but I want to talk some more about this with you when we come back, okay?
Sure.
John Richardson is my guest, co-chair of the Alliance for the Defense of Canadian Sovereignty. I'm Dave Taylor, back after this.
1, 2, 3, my baby don't mess around because she loves me so, and this I know for sure.
Welcome back. I'm talking to John Richardson, co-chair of the Alliance for the Defense of Canadian Sovereignty, about the American government's attempt to pick the pockets of people it considers Americans who consider themselves Canadians or Brits or whomever, right? Because the IRS is after everyone who was born in the United States, no matter where they live. Correct, John?
Well, that would be the beginning. They're after people who were born in Canada to U.S. parents in some cases. They're after people who are given green cards who no longer live in the United States. Basically, what this is about, okay, leaving aside the technicalities, is that the United States government is attempting to levy taxes on people who do not live in the United States on money that is in no way, shape, or form connected to the United States.
And to what end, John?
There's no other country who does this, except for Eritrea.
Yeah, and to what end?
I don't know. I think it's a great mistake. It's generating tremendous hostility towards the United States throughout the world at a time where I think the country, frankly, needs as many friends as it can get. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing about this is that there are many Canadians who the IRS would consider to be American taxpayers who don't even owe any taxes. because there are certain types of things that credit out, but there's also another group who does owe a lot of taxes because of incompatibilities in the tax system. I mean, people should know, for example, that one of many examples would be the tax-free capital gain you enjoy in Canada doesn't exist in the United States.
Okay.
Canadian-controlled private corporations are very dangerous vehicles for people who are considered to be American taxpayers. And then there's a whole list of information reporting requirements, massive disclosure under threat of penalty.
Yeah, and all of it thoroughly unjustifiable.
Not only unjustifiable, but grossly, obscenely unfair, to the point where, where people are desperate to renounce their U.S. citizenship. They feel they're forced to renounce their citizenship.
That is a relatively new development. I mean, even during the Vietnam War, my impression, was that draft dodgers who came north were not at all eager to renounce their American citizenship. They just wanted not to go fight in Vietnam.
I think that's right, and it's interesting that you bring that example up because what the U.S. response at that time was that if you became a Canadian citizen, you were no longer an American citizen. In other words, they were basically attacking those people by stripping them of their citizenship. Now, they are trying to claim that in many cases, people who became Canadian citizens really are still American citizens. So in the 70s,
including the ones they stripped the citizenship from. I mean, if you're a draft dodger who became a Canadian citizen and they took your American citizenship away, now suddenly are they after you for back taxes?
In my view, those people lost their citizenship, and that group of people I don't think should be concerned. But it's a very complicated situation because there are a couple of Supreme Court decisions that made the loss of, that, let me put it this way, that allowed those people to get their U.S. citizenship back. So some of them are in sort of a no man's land. And, frankly, those kinds of people do need counseling on their citizenship, some legal advice. They should not assume they are American citizens.
Okay.
In fact, the first step for anybody is to get clarification on their citizenship status.
Then, if it comes to the point that one does decide to renounce one's U.S. citizenship, which one may not even have known that one had, suddenly the State Department is saying, well, there's been such an increase, and there has been an increase in the number of people trying to do this. It's been such an increase, it's increased our workload so much that now we're going to charge you the full and fair cost of processing your application. So suddenly it's 5 times what it was.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a bunch of garbage, okay, their explanation. I mean, it's a threat. It's a punitive thing. I mean, under international human rights law, people have the right to renounce their citizenship, and, the time it takes the U.S. government is irrelevant, on that particular point. But I want to add something that's extremely important here. That $2,350 is only the beginning for what are called covered expatriates. Oh, yeah. The United States wants to impose an exit tax. In other words, they want you to pay a percentage of your assets to the United States in exchange for being able to renounce your citizenship. Now, not everybody, okay, but a very large percentage of people who live in major cities in Canada will have reached the asset level, which is only $2 million U.S. I mean, you own a house in Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver.
You're probably there,
part of the way there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is, everybody has to pay tax number one, the $2,350. But those who are not tax compliant or have more than $2 million U.S. in assets are subject to, I kid you not, an exit tax where you have to basically list all your assets and, there are pretend sales and pretend gains and things like that, and you actually have to pay the IRS a final settlement on that.
If you were living in another country as a person whom America considered to be American, would you be subject to the same rules and the same penalties that we've been talking about, or would you have some protection from that thanks to the government of the UK or the government of Germany or the government of France or whatever?
No, No. The interesting thing about this, and part of the unfairness, is that the Internal Revenue Code, the American tax rules, apply to anybody who the U.S. considers to be an American person.
No matter where they live.
Anywhere in the world, no matter where they live. Now, different countries have carved out, different, what I would call country-specific tax treaties. For example, Canada has a tax treaty that, helps protect the RRSP, for example. Mm-hmm. But there's also the savings clause in all of these treaties, which at the end of the day provides very little protection for American citizens abroad, which basically says that the U.S. can tax them according to their own tax rules. Mm-hmm. And what you need to understand about the U.S. tax system is that it operates on two basic principles. The first thing is that anything that's foreign is going to be taxed very punitively. And the second is that anything that involves tax deferral will be punished and taxed punitively. Mm-hmm. Now, what does that mean in people talk? It means the whole universe of Canadian financial planning products, including, your principal residence, because that's a tax-free capital gain, is going to be dealt with very, very harshly and punitively. Bottom line, retirement planning for Americans abroad, almost impossible.
Okay. John, I'm almost out of time. Tell me where your lawsuit sits right now and what next steps are for you.
The statement of claim was filed a couple of weeks ago. I believe next week would be the deadline for the Government of Canada to file its statement of defense. We're at the beginning of what we expect to be a marathon, not a sprint. The issues are serious. They affect far more than the million or so Canadians who are considered to be Americans, because they have non-American spouses, et cetera, et cetera. My estimate affects 10% of the country. I predict it will end up at the Supreme Court of Canada.
Okay. All right. John, good to talk to you. We'll stay in touch, see how it goes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. John Richardson, co-chair of the Alliance for the Defense of Canadian Sovereignty. It is unbelievable. It's unbelievable that the U.S. government is going after people who, in many cases, for decades, have not considered themselves to be Americans, American citizens, but indeed Canadian citizens, for money they don't owe. It's unbelievable the U.S. government has the audacity to think it has a claim on the assets of those people. It's incomprehensible that the Harper government is playing right along. So we will watch this story, because I think it's a gross violation of rights and miscarriage of justice. I'm Dave Taylor.